Chapter 3. My initial response to our breakup was to stay up late with a bottle of Jack Daniels, a tinny of dope, and sit alone in the large bush-clad house we'd been looking after for the past few months. For company I had my old friends Jimmy, Janice and Bob on the stereo, and one psychotic cat. I was still managing to go to work, although my erratic thoughts and emotions were coming apparent to my colleagues. I was in the process of hitting my first rock bottom. My chronic cannabis use was taking me nowhere fast. I was becoming increasingly isolative and unwilling to spend time with people who didn't smoke dope. I was not coping with the relationship breakup. In short, I was beginning to fall apart. After 3 months of this, things took an irreversibly dreadful turn. One night, after another solitary session, I went to coma out in bed, which these days was the only way I was getting any sleep. I lay staring into the darkness and I was feeling pretty weird. Something wasn't right. Next thing, images began to appear floating in front of me, strange things. Living, three-dimensional images contained inside what looked like bubbles, with an amazing clarity, definition and intensity. I did not know who or what they were about, but they were intensely real, like I was looking into the lives, at that moment, of other living beings somewhere out there. In my out-of-it state I lay there, dually occupying two halves of the same mind, one half absorbed in the hallucinations, watching intently, the other half detached and floating above my body, as if I was observing them from outside of myself. I figured I must be having some kind of out-of-body experience. Cool, I thought. I lay there giving myself over to the trip, and to the sense that these visions were taking me somewhere I was curious to go if I would just relax, let go, and go along for the ride. Where it was going is that for the first time in my life I was hallucinating, although I did not know that's what was happening. After all, I'd only been smoking dope. Everyone knows that's fairly harmless. The hallucinations were both visual and olfactory in form, that is, containing smells, and I began to become aware of a sense and a shadow of a male presence in the room. Next thing I know, something that looked like a projection screen opened up on the wall in front of me, and I had the sensation of being sucked into it, travelling through time and hurtling through space back to some unknown place in my life where I was experiencing being sexually abused as a child. I was literally reliving the past experience in the present. I could see the man's shape, I could feel his weight lying on top of me, and I could smell him, a combination of alcohol and something musty like hay or an old coat. I could not determine his identity. At the precise moment that he finished his attack, I felt my mind split apart. I awoke from the trance or whatever it was to find myself screaming and retching, trying to get this sordid psychic imprint out of my body. There was no one to hear me. In a lightning panic I rang the neighbours. It was about 1 a.m. I was so confused and terrified that it occurred to me that this might have just happened to me in real time, and if so, was there someone in the house? The neighbour came over with his dog and searched the property. He didn't find anyone, of course. His wife suggested I phone a friend to come and stay with me for the night. I didn't know who to ring, so I rang my ex, not exactly a booty call. She arrived at the house in the depth of the night, saw the state of me and said straight off, "You've got to stop smoking dope, you are a total mess." I couldn't argue with that. I'd pushed my mind to the edge of its limits, and now my sanity was in tatters. My life now contained the demon of some abuser from my past that I had not known was there. The memory had burst forth from a crack in my mind, and that crack was now a deep fissure. This changed everything. We cleaned up the house together that night, collecting every bit of dope and paraphernalia we could find. We flushed down the toilet the contents of my tins and the seedlings I was lovingly rearing in the sunroom. There were pipes, old bits of tin foil smeared with the remnants of cannabis oil, burnt knives from hot knifing. There was drug stuff all over the place. We binned the lot. Over the following days, weeks and months, my mind tried with futility to gather itself and make coherent sense of these fractured pieces of remembering, but it couldn't do it. Gradually I had no sane reference point left to pin them to. For a whole year I existed in a psychiatric freefall, a terrifying time during which I continued to live alone, unable to sleep, and increasingly fearful and paranoid. I feared sleeping. I was terrified that if I closed my eyes, the hallucinatory flashbacks would begin again. I remained mentally in a state of high alert which would teeter frequently into panic attacks. I lived in fear of the amorphous figure from my past breaking into my psychological house, or possibly my real house. As I did not know his identity, I couldn't rule out that he may still be in my life. I feared being awake. The confusion, anxiety, and sense of foreboding had shifted from being primarily a mental experience to taking over my physical being as well. My body was being constantly flooded with adrenaline, released under the command of my hyperactive panic signals. I felt powerless over this ancient fight or flight response that had gone into overdrive, and no amount of herbal teas, affirmations, or aromatherapy was able to arrest my fall. I was trapped in some kind of continuous feedback loop where fear and anxiety would trigger the adrenaline output, which in turn would increase the fear and anxiety, and around it would go. During this time I moved into a bedsit, still thinking it was a good idea to live on my own, proving I no longer had any idea what was good for me. The bedsit overlooked a large cemetery. I won't do that again. Here I came to truly know terror, and it would be a frequent uninvited guest over the next few months.